Welcome to the Spirit RX podcast, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Healing. In this place, two healers come together, each walking a different path, yet bound by a common purpose. Dr. Luke, a quantum chiropractor, and Dr. Hummel, a naturopathic doctor. These two practitioners have dedicated themselves to a vital quest to unite the timeless remedies passed down through the ages with the powerful discoveries of modern medical science. For they understand what many have forgotten, that true healing honors both tradition and innovation. Should you wish to learn more of their stories, their practices, or how to walk this path with them, you will find that knowledge in the link below. And now, let the healing wisdom begin.
Well, we're really excited today to have Deborah Provost with us, hypnotherapist. Deborah, thanks so much for joining us. And could you just begin a little bit by introducing yourself and telling us what you do?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you both so much for the invitation to be a part of the Spirit RX podcast series that you guys have put together. They're just full of so much wisdom and insight, and I've really enjoyed listening to them and learning more about you and your services. As far as me, just a little background. I grew up in small town Lakeview, Oregon, on a ranch with a family of 7 kids and mom and dad who were they loved each other, but I wouldn't say they necessarily loved each other. And so I learned very early on how to maneuver and stay below the radar, I would say. But in that process, growing up, it was always those, who are you going to be? What are you going to do type of thing. And I always kind of identified who I was going to be with what I was going to do. And I always wanted to be a teacher. And in that process, we did some research as juniors in high school, and I interviewed a lot of my teachers and asked them about if they had it to do over again, would they? And more of them said no than yes. And so I thought, well, I don't want to be a teacher then. So then I didn't know what to do. And my dad's like, be a dental hygienist. And I'm like, sure, dental hygienist, that'd be great. Didn't know what a dental hygienist was, but I researched that and I was like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. My classroom would change every hour. And so going through hygiene school, we were told that we would burn out in 5 years. So through that process of the first 5 years of my career, it's like, now what am I going to do? I have this degree, I've spent all this time. And in that process, realized that it was really up to me to choose to be the best hygienist that I could possibly be. There was a book by the name of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl that I read at about the age of 24. That literally changed the trajectory of my life. And it turned into this amazing 38-year career as a hygienist. I got to travel and teach for other colleagues. And it was just an amazing, amazing career. But through that entire process, I was also studying on the sidelines. Dead week of my senior year of college, mom was diagnosed with brain tumors. And we were told that she could have surgery, radiation, or chemo. And those choices, the benefits and consequences of those were there. And she was given like 3 years to live. So with that, it really changed the trajectory of another key element that changed my life as a healthcare provider is really became clear that my job was to educate and empower my patients about their choices, the benefits and the consequences of those, and then let them choose, because nobody knows the answers for themselves better than themselves. And as a healthcare provider, I've always felt that my job was to empower and educate. And then through that whole process, my husband was diagnosed with primary progressive MS in 2006, and we were given a similar diagnosis. You're going to be in a wheelchair within 3 to 5 years, and you're going to be gone shortly thereafter. We are officially 19 plus years post-diagnosis, and he's in the best shape and health of his life. And we did that through the help of allopathic medicine, of course, because there's a place for that and it's beautiful and it's there. But we also really were gifted and blessed to be able to tap into a lot of this alternative healthcare as well, from nutrition and lifestyle. And he did a lot of visualizations, massage therapy. There's all these other modalities out there, and blending those was just a key piece of the puzzle for his health journey. And then in 2018, so things were going along really well. And I'm going to back up. In 2014, my father-in-law had passed away. They were developing a destination resort south of Ashland. It ended up going into litigation, had been in litigation for 25 plus years, but the property had sold, things were shifting and moving. And then he passed away, and It was in the middle of a lawsuit. The people who had purchased it wanted their money back. Things were going, as we all know, in 2008, the economy was what it was. There was a lot more to the piece of the puzzle than that, but we ended up losing that lawsuit. Multi-million dollars had transferred hands, and then it was our responsibility to get that money back. So we ended up selling lots of assets and got ourselves liquid again. And then, so things were starting to mellow out and things were going really well. And then in 2018, my younger sister was murdered by her son. And I'm a very resourceful and I would say gifted person when it comes to like putting on the bootstraps and off we go. And that stopped me in my tracks. There was nothing that I could do to get out of my way. I had tried traditional counseling. I'd gone to grief counseling. I had talked to the priests endlessly. I talked to anyone who would listen, just searching for something to help me get unstuck and move forward. And this little voice in my head is hypnotherapy. And I'm like, yeah, pretty sure I'm not going to do hypnotherapy. And yet that voice was very persistent. So through the course of time, I did some research, found a local hypnotherapist, and within 4 sessions, I was back on track. And so after my 4th session, I had seen her on a Tuesday, and then that Friday, I had signed up to become certified. And that was back in 2021. And I am now a board certified hypnotherapist and helping other people get themselves out of their way. So I share this story because all of us have a story. All of us have these events and these life things that happen to us. And I know that those most painful, those darkest times in our lives are the place where when we can lean into those, we then have the ability to shift and change, because the joy and the happiness and the grace on the other side of it is priceless. And really, that's why we're here. That's why these obstacles show up in our lives, is to help us grow into the people who we were really meant to be and why we're here on this earth. So that's a little bit of background about me and how I got to where I'm at.
Yeah, I think that gives us a really beautiful understanding of the different points in your life that sort of shifted your perspective around your commitment to health and wellness. And, I think hardships, as human beings in general, hardships tend to be the things that most readily build up our internal muscles to work with the world around us. And they change us significantly. But I think that that's a beautiful outline story of what brought you to where you are today. One of the things that I would want to jump into here is just understanding a little bit more, not only about what you're doing, but like specifically the type of conditions and situations you find yourself treating in your practice as a hypnotherapist. And we'd love to just understand a little bit more about those type of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So people come to me for all sorts of reasons. One of the most popular ones right now, it seems to be, is weight loss. Weight loss is a huge piece of the puzzle. Stress and anxiety, just being like unhappy in their lives. They know they're here for something bigger than what they're currently doing. They feel stuck. They feel oftentimes depressed or at ends in relationships that maybe aren't working for them, or have had past relationships that they've not been able to let go of and move on. There's like pain management. If you can imagine it, that the hypnotherapy is an avenue to help have some healing around it. One thing that's important to note about hypnotherapy is that we are not curing anything. We are helping provide therapy and transition for the people that we get to be honored to serve.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
What are some current trends in health or wellness that either you're the most excited about or the most skeptical about?
That's a great question, because this whole GLP-1 thing that's going out with the weight loss, the shots that so many people are doing and engaging in. And I'm torn. I was really torn both ways, because it's like, gosh, we should be able to do this, just get ourselves out of our way with it. And yet it's providing such a beautiful transition for people to have some successes. Because when we're able to have that success, then it starts shifting our confidence, it starts shifting our beliefs in ourselves. And where I become skeptical with it is if we're not addressing the underlying issues of why that weight's there, then the risk of relapse is significant. And so there feels like there's this bridge that's going on between the allopathic providers and the alternative providers that are actually we're able to bridge that gap and help them specifically with these shots is get people where they're having some successes, and then I get to work with them and help them change those beliefs, those behaviors, those patterns that got them where they're at. And more often than not, it's really not that person's fault. Our food industry is such a menagerie of, they say, if you're going to go to the grocery store and shop, you want to shop the perimeter. And one of the things that when Greg was diagnosed with MS, that his homeopathic doctor had recommended is take all your sugars and all high fructose corn syrups out of your diet. Back then been considered extremely healthy eaters. And we went into our cupboards and took out 9 grocery bags of food.
Wow.
And felt horrible, giving them away, but we also knew that this is what people were going to eat. So we did. And now it's really about that whole food, nutrient dense nutrition. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I think about in the GLP-1 industry is that a lot of the allopathic practitioners are telling people, well, you're probably going to be on this permanently. And I think you're absolutely right. One of my favorite books that I've read in the past focused on habits. And the idea is that we sort of have a threshold of, I would say, discipline, a discipline threshold. And I would say that we can raise that threshold by shifting our mindset around things, but also getting help on a physical level to diminish the things that push us above the threshold. And so I think the diminishment of hunger, the benefits of helping insulin resistance, the beauty of those GLP-1 inhibitors is that they help people stay within the level of discipline they need to have. And then people like yourself, practitioners like yourself, who are shifting the beliefs and their mindset around how they interact with food, how they interact with their body in the physical world and exercising and doing things, has a really, really profound synergistic benefit so that people can ultimately get off of those. Because the long-term side effects of those, in my opinion, you got to be careful about the dosing and the long-term side effects. So,
well, what you're saying about the food is just absolutely right on. I mean, I'm old as dirt, or sometimes I'll say that Abraham Lincoln was only a couple grades ahead of me in school. But I remember my grandmother making homemade bread every day, and nobody in the family was overweight. And so the food is just different now than it was. I talked to some of my friends and relatives who live in Europe, and they're telling me different kinds of stories about their food. So that's just a reality that we have to come to grips with, that if you live in the United States, don't count on the food all being safe. And so I love what you're doing, and I love those comments that you just made.
Well, thank you. And another thing that's so interesting about this is when we look at what they call the logical levels of alignment, typically we're wanting to change things at an environmental level or a behavioral level, that's great. But really, we want to look at also those capabilities, like how capable are we truly able to do that? What beliefs and values are lined up, connected with it as well? And then how do we identify with that? And even at a bigger level is that spiritual level. But when we make the shifts and the changes at those higher levels of alignment, what's cool about it is it has that very simple cascading effect. And the cascading effect is where the real shifts take place. Because if we change a belief around something, which in hypnotherapy and NLP it's not a difficult thing to do. It's just having the time to sit down with people to help them self-discover their own truths.
And it's so easy in the evening to just be kind of winding down a little bit. And then next thing you know, you're snacking. And then just feeling like I need more snacks and more snacks all the way up to bed. And we know deep down that that's not good for us, but it's hard emotionally mentally to break those cycles.
Yeah.
So I can definitely see a gap where you could enter in and be a big help to assist people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that, and with most people, when we're snacking on something sugary, right? It's a cracker, it's a piece of bread, it's something carb typically.
Right.
And
Right.
what's interesting about all of that is if sugar were discovered today, it would be more addictive than heroin. Like, so it wouldn't even be on the market. It would have been pulled away. And so so it's very fascinating, just the chemical changes that take place in the brain that triggers those continuing to eat. And again, it's helping people understand that sort of stuff. Because when they understand that, they're able to make those shifts and changes that they so desperately seek and want.
I love the way you're discussing it too, because if you go to your general practitioner, A, they don't have a lot of time to spend with you on this, and B, they don't have a lot of training
Right.
in this kind of area as far as the diet, nutrition, etc. They're not spending much time on the emotional, spiritual, mental levels. That's a great place where you could step in and fill in the gap.
Yeah, thank you. I look at it as there's kind of like these tiers, and the tiers consist of our mental, our emotional, our physical, our spiritual aspects. Like
Right.
there's those tiers, and it's figuring out within those how to manage them. Like it's this tapestry, but even at the center of that is our soul. And when we can really identify us at that soul level, the shifts and changes that take place within that tapestry of our life is huge. It's profound.
Right.
And I'm walking, living proof of it. That's, is how I feel. Like I've been there, I've done that, and now I'm continuing to do it in a different way.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I love that you're here communicating with us about this. I have heard very positive things about you from some of the people that you're working with, without any specifics being added, and about how much you're helping them in your practice shift their worldviews and ultimately seeing really profound healing responses. So here's a big question, and this is where we're going to jump to, the stuff that people out there listening to us might be, what about this? And because I don't think everyone really understands hypnosis as well as those who have been trained in some form of medical hypnosis or background in it.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about what the difference is between what you do in the clinical work, right?
Mhm.
Versus someone who is up on stage having people, cluck like a chicken.
Right. So we are trained differently. And at the same time, these stage hypnotists, they are there for entertainment purposes. They also happen to be really skilled from a clinical perspective as I am. But from that stage perspective, they're vetting the clientele, the participants of the audience that are coming into that venue to be, to watch the stage presentation. And they're highly skilled professionals that naturally can pick out the people who are natural entertainers. They like to be the center of attention. They like to be on stage. They like to be seen. And so they are consciously choosing who's coming up on the stage. And they're also choosing people that are not that, because that's part of the whole performance, right? Like,
So if I came to your office, could you get me to cluck like a chicken?
only if you wanted to.
Only if
Wanted to.
Let me think about that one.
That's a great response.
You could do that right now. you could you could do it. Yeah. So
If you start clucking like a chicken,
Yeah, I might start clucking like a chicken during this interview, and that'll really show the audience what you can do.
do it.
And it could be totally your choice, and you're choosing to do that.
Hey, if that helps me lose weight, I might go for it.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Another topic. Well, can you describe like what it might really feel like to be in a state of hypnosis? Are you asleep? Are you unconscious? I think that the average person might have some fear around, okay, I'm gonna put myself into your hands, but I'm not gonna know what you're doing with me. What's that gonna be like, and can I trust you?
Yeah. So what's it going to be like? It's a very, very relaxed state of being. So when I am working with people, we're just having a conversation. My office is set up like a living room. It's a very comfortable place where we just talk. I'm getting clarity about what that client is wanting to see the shifts and the changes in. I'm getting clear about what that means, which means that they too are getting clear of what that means, what it's going to look like, sound like, and feel like when they achieve it versus what they're currently experiencing. From that place, and once they've shared their truth, I've gathered my information that I need. I invite them to sit in the hypnosis chair. It's a very comfy, it's like sitting on a cloud
Okay.
recliner, so comfortable. And then I guide them through this guided imagery and I bring them into this very deep state of relaxation. And we're engaging the alpha and the theta brain waves. At the alpha,
Right.
it's more that state of relaxation, and yet there's an alertness with it. With theta,
Right.
they're very deeply relaxed and not
Right.
necessarily aware of it. But what we're doing in that very relaxed state is we know that we utilize 10% or 5 to 10% of our brains, depending on what research we read. But
Right.
what's so amazing about hypnotherapy is we get to open up that doorway to all of those resources, to that 95% of the resources that are hanging out back here that have just been hanging out and waiting to be discovered. And so
Right.
they gain access to that. And sometimes it's a conscious awareness that that shift is taking place. That awareness is like, oh my gosh, I got it. And then other times there's not a conscious awareness that it's happened. And yet they leave, and either in that moment through the post talk and the follow-up that we do post session, or they leave and a day, a two, a week later, they have those aha clicks. It's like, I got it.
Gotcha.
Being patient and trusting that within themselves. And that's part of the kind of the underlying therapy that's taking place, is that real self-love, that true self-knowing, that self-trust, because when we work and live from that place, the possibilities are endless.
Well,
So
thank you for that. Just hearing you talk about it's making me want to trust you and come have you do some work with me.
I would be honored.
So I think it's an interesting perspective that I think people have out there when you're, putting your trust, blending someone else's voice into your own unconscious. And so I think that it's really important that people, when they're working with someone that is in that role, that they can trust, the person they're working with. And one of the things that I like to talk about on our podcast, especially, is that there's a tendency out there to have a lot of division in the allopathic versus the alternative world, versus medical hypnosis, clinical hypnosis versus stage hypnosis. You have all of these different versus past life regression. You have all of these different views and beliefs that are surrounding what people come to you with. And so I know this is a little bit outside of where I would focus on our questions here today we sent, but I'm curious, how do you overcome some of those obstacles with patients? How do you help them resonate with you and your beliefs, and if their beliefs are a little different around how they approach medicine?
So that's a great question. And one thing I think that's really important is I intentionally keep my beliefs out of the scenario. The time that I spend with these clients is about them. And my job, my responsibility to them is to honor their truth, because it's in me understanding their truth, their reality, that they then are able to see the shifts and the changes in a different way than they've ever been able to experience it before. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that actually answers it perfectly. I think that we all have stories, good and bad, of working with other practitioners where we didn't feel heard or listened to, or we felt like they weren't really looking at us from the perspective of what we were hoping they would do. They were following their own path. And I think that's a beautiful thing that you said, is holding space for them and their beliefs and supporting them in that. And I think that's where you get the most change with people too. So that's beautiful. I
Yeah,
really love
great.
it.
And I think it's too, it's like if we can't meet people where they are as healthcare providers, the odds of us helping them shift and change and them feeling heard and taken care of and loved and supported, there's a gap there, and it's a significant gap. And then the patient's frustrated, the patient's frustrated because they weren't heard, they weren't seen, they weren't felt. And we as providers are frustrated because they're not changing. Like, what the heck? Type of.
Right.
We can really understand where they're coming from, and it takes time. And that's one thing I love about the dental practices that I got to work in and what I get to do now as a hypnotherapist is we get to take the time to really understand where they're coming from, to help them make the choices that are best for and ideal for their health and well-being, because nobody's going to know what their best option is better than them. And I reel it back into when my husband was diagnosed with primary progressive MS. To stick strictly with the allopathic approach, which Greg was adamant he was not going to do, because at the time it was like, we can give you this medication. You're going to have this, I want to say it was a shot, and I don't remember the details, but once a week. So you need to pick out the 2 days a week that you want to feel good. And the other day, you're going to feel like not great. And we're going to top that fact with this medication works 20% of the time on 20% of the patients. So the odds were like, this is not. And Greg was like, I'm not doing that. I'm absolutely not doing that. And we were fortunate and found resources beyond allopathic medicine that help support the shift and the change. And the flip side is we needed that allopathic provider to provide us with that objective data, because it's nice to be able to have that MRI done and see that the lesions are shrinking, to see that he's not getting more, which is super, super uncommon in an MS, primary progressive MS diagnosis. And yet it was us as a team, as a unit, finding the providers that worked within our belief system, which was around lifestyle changes. There was a guy out of Colorado that we worked with. There was a local homeopathic doctor that we worked with. There were nutritionists that there was this core group of people that we quarterbacked. And that's, I think, one thing that I would love is that our patients, our clients, the people we serve, they're their very best advocates. And yet so often we're looking outside of ourselves for the answers. And then when it doesn't work for us, we're upset with that provider because it failed. And yet, what if we looked within? What if we found what was true for us? Then it becomes easier to choose the right practitioners to help us get to where we want to go.
That's perfect. You mentioned a little bit about helping folks with some weight loss issues. Another common one that someone might think of is maybe smoking, to stop smoking. But beyond those two things, what kinds of things might you be able to help with other than those that people should consider?
Yeah. So honestly, anyone that's feeling stuck in their life in some way, whether they're stuck in their career, they're stuck in a relationship, they're stuck, they're overwhelmed, they're exhausted, they're on the edge of burnout, and they want to get back. They know there's something bigger and better for them. They just don't know what it is. And that's where I get to help people rediscover that. And in doing that, I've had the opportunity to watch people make huge changes. There's so many that have come my way. And one of the gals, she was happy in her career, but she wasn't happy as she knew she was capable of being. And she wanted this new job and this new opportunity, but the job she really wanted was in the middle of the country. But she's like, I'm not qualified for it. I'm like, well, it never hurts to ask. It never hurts to apply. And so she put in her applications up and down the West Coast and this one in the center of the country. And she came back after we had done some work together. She goes, I got the job. She doubled her income. She relocated herself, and she was better able to provide for her family than she'd ever thought she'd been capable. Another gal, she's a younger gal, came to me because she's like, as a kid, I was gifted, and I was one of those gifted and talented kids. I went through this program, but I don't know who I am. Like I'm not living to my full potential. And in the process of her and I working together, it was priceless. She rediscovered herself, and she had literally hidden herself away in the top of her closet, back behind a bunch of stuff. And she put herself up there as a very young child, unknowingly and unwittingly, so that she wouldn't lose who she was. And she got to rediscover that. And that, to this day, that one chokes me up, because she's back on track. She's being the mom that she wanted to be. She's starting to step into the career path that she wants to do. The angst and the anxiety that she had isn't there. And other people are out there changing the world. They're getting into politics that they would have never thought they were doing. And now they're, searching, and people are finding their voices. The people I get to work with are finding their voices and stepping into their power. It's really
I
cool.
love that. I love the description of the first example you gave of the woman who didn't think that she was qualified for a position, but ultimately got that position anyway. And I think often of the Dunning-Kruger effect that people have, intelligent people typically have. And I don't want to say that they're people who think otherwise are unintelligent, because that's not what this is saying. But the idea is that there's a certain level of confidence people often have in the beginning when they don't know much about something. And that's like this really high level of confidence.
Yeah.
And then as they learn more and they become actually more trained and understanding about things, their confidence sort of drops down because they recognize how much they don't know. And then over time, as they become experts in their field and grow in that knowledge, I don't know if they ever, eventually, maybe down the road, they get to that point where they have that level of confidence they did in the beginning.
Mhm.
But I think that it's eye-opening to see how many people restrict their qualities, their capabilities, because they understand enough to be down here in that confidence.
And that's such a beautiful lead into, so often in life, we're walking around doing what we're doing. It's like this unconscious incompetence. We're just doing what we're doing, being who we're being. And then there's this nudge, there's this pull, there's this, oh, I need to do something different. And so it becomes this conscious incompetence. Like, we're now aware that we're not doing things the way that we want to be doing it. It's uncomfortable. It's this, it's like, and I need a shift. And so we start exploring and we start figuring out. And eventually we land on that, oh, this is it. I get to help get from point A to point B a little quicker, for help them get there a bit quicker. But then it becomes this conscious incompetence, or conscious competence, because we're practicing it, we're learning it, we're in that learning curve. And as we learn and integrate, we then go to this unconscious incompetence. And a prime example of that is learning to drive a car. Like, when we first got behind the wheel of the car, it was like, oh, geez, right? There's this.
Remember that.
Look out, world.
I scared the bejeebers out of my mom when I was a kid.
Yes, yes. That adds gray hairs to parents very quickly.
But now, as adults, and we've been doing this for, years, and really not that long after we were trained, we were able to get behind the wheel of the car and go from point A to point B and not even necessarily have a recollection of how we got there, because our unconscious mind has now been trained and has taken it over. So we can think about, what we're going to cook for dinner, or what hike we're going to go on, why we're driving down the road, and we get to point B and we don't even have a recollection of how we got there. And so
Living life on autopilot.
yes, and oftentimes that's what we do. And yet, when we want those changes that we desire live within inside of it. It's that internally referenced and resourced.
Well, do you have any closing thoughts or advice for people that you would want to leave us with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So all the answers that you're seeking are truly within yourself.
They're all in here.
They're in your whole being. And it's this
Yeah.
alignment of our mind, body, spirit, soul, that when we get those aligned, it's huge. And so there's that. I also, when I work with clients, I see them one-to-one. I also offer small groups so people can experience hypnotherapy without it being so out there, because I know for me, when I was introduced to it or researching it initially, I was pretty sure I was going to burn in hell if I did something like that. So, oh my gosh, this is such a great modality of healing. And I just want to share it, share it with the world. And so I do offer one-on-one. I offer small group as well. And before anybody has to commit to anything, I'm offering a free discovery call between now and the end of the year. So people can sit down, we can have a conversation, and people can decide if this is a fit for them or not, because that's where it really begins.
Amazing. All right, big curveball. I'm a jokester, so jokes about hypnotherapy or hypnotist. Do you have any that come to top of your head?
No, because I am not a jokester.
Okay, I'm going to tell you one then. And I like to do this at the end because if it's detracts from the podcast, we'll edit it out. Okay, so there's a young woman in her 20s. She's attractive, but she's having a lot of trouble in her dating life, and it all has to do with going to the bathroom. Like she just has trouble when it's time to pee. Most of the time she can't. It just won't happen when she wants it to happen. And then at other times, all of a sudden there's this urgency, and now it's starting when she doesn't want it to happen. So this is really hindering her dating life. So anyway, she decides, you know what, I've tried everything. I'm going to try hypnotherapy. So she connects with the hypnotherapist. They get started, and the hypnotist says, okay, we need to come up with a word that's going to be like your trigger word. But we don't want it to be so common that just you're walking down the street and you randomly hear it, and then now you're going to start urinating. So anyway, they come up with the word urinate because most people aren't going to say that in everyday language. Sure enough, this works really well. So for a couple of weeks, no problems. When it's time, she would sit down and say the word urinate, and then boom, everything would be handled appropriately. So now she's finally ready to date. So there's a young man she's interested in. She goes on a date. Everything is going splendidly. When they get to the very end, she's like feeling really excited, but she's like, hey, how do you think this went? And the young man says, I think it went great. I think that you're intelligent, you're charming, you're funny, and you're very attractive. As a matter of fact, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say you're an 8. Okay, that's a bad, right? Bad joke. But I would say, Deborah, on a scale of 1 to 10, you've been a 10 today. And love it that you've joined us and shared some of this. And you've just opened up more of or the content and more of the expanse of why hypnotherapy could be a great thing to add to a team approach towards someone's healing journey. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing your time with us. It's been lovely. It's been great. And it's been very edifying. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well.
Thank
I appreciate
you.
it.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.